Hi and welcome back to Storytime. As you can see at the top of the screen, I'm trying something. I've created a monetary goal. I'm working towards getting a better mic so that Storytimes won't become tinny, which it's always annoyed me that, I'm not giving you guys the best possible Storytime sounds as possible. Sorry, that was redundant. But yeah, the best Storytime sounds as possible. And, also eventually we'll work towards getting a webcam so that you can see me reading the story. I usually snoodle up in a nice, really soft blanket, and sometimes I'm visited by a cat. And then on the left-hand side at the top, I have my subscriber goal. I guess I need to write subscriber on that. But anyways, when we get 12 more. Oh, hang on a second. Oh, thank you so much. We've just raised one, so I don't know why that wasn't taking. Thank you so much, Bright. How are you doing? Thank you. Yeah, 3 months. It's amazing. I've been an affiliate for that long, and we've both got our little 3 toe beans. So that means actually you get a lurking cat now. Anyways, when we get, and now it's going to be 11 more subscribers, we get a new emote, and I'm not really sure which one I'm going to do. I was thinking of the cat's face in the mug. Things are going okay for me, thank you. I have a bit of a headache because the allergy. What's not Maestro? Come on, just get in my lap. Come on. You're turning into Snockings. Come on, just sit in my lap. What? What do you want? Sorry about this. Maestro's doing that thing where he's using his claws and kind of tugging on my blanket because he wants attention or he wants up. He didn't used to ask permission. Come on, get up here. I can't lift you with one hand. You're a heavy boy. But yeah, I've got a little bit of a headache, allergens and dusts and all of that stuff because we are still very, very dry over here. We got 2 lovely rains, and that's not nearly enough. Come on. Thank you. Okay, Maestro has joined us for who knows how long. He's a sweet boy. But he's turning annoying. He's constantly meowing at me. Although right now he's kind of quiet. Thank you, Maestro. How are things on your end? How's the COVID situation down under and everything? Oh, and how's your job going? I bet you're probably listening to Storytime while you're doing a meeting or at working or something like that. It's nice that you can do that from home. Hey, Corel. Oh, thank you so much for the bits. Lovely. I love the corgis. So cute. You've got the leaderboard number 2, the silver pyramid. And how has your day been going, Corel? Well, I'm glad to hear that it's going okay, better than not. And I hope you continue to have, or that you have a good rest of your day. Hopefully, Storytime will help that a bit. And I would play some Terraria after the stream. However, the headache is not being kind to me, so I have a feeling that lots of movement will probably not go well with that. Oh, nice. You're not in lockdown? That's really nice. Yeah. Capacity limits, social distancing, mask, definitely, like, we have been doing that all along. Unfortunately, here, the cases have just exploded. We had 10 new hospitalizations last week before Thanksgiving. And so, you know, we it's the weirdest, it was the weirdest Black Friday I have ever worked, and I've worked about 18 of them, because we didn't have the massive crowds. Everybody was really great about, waiting for us to be able to let them in, because we were only allowing about 10 to 15 people in the store at a time. And we've been doing a lot of internet orders as well. And for the most part, like, we have really fabulous customers who come to the bookstore. I've heard some not as good stories from other places. But yeah, I guess. Oh, okay. Hey, Snockings. Maestro, where'd you go? You were just here. I'll be right back. Find those little rapscallions. Snockies? Yes, you too, Maestro. Did she disappear? You are there. You are under my blankets. Hi. Come on out. Pharrell's giving you a treat. Snoggies. Yours is up here. Hi. Snockings. Come up here. She's not willingly coming up, so I had to lift her up. And here you go, Maestro. Wonderful junk. This is from Corel. And the kitties would thank you if they weren't kitties. Yep, that's all I have for you. All right. Excellent. Should we go ahead and get started? We are... Goodness, where did I put you? Here we go. So we're reading 3 stories today from Poirot Investigates. And then we'll finish up the book on Wednesday with 4 stories. So that's going to be a little bit longer than today's stream. And then next week, we're going to start our Christmas reads with The Haunted House by Charles Dickens and others. And I need to come up with some Christmas art for that. I have ideas. I'll play around with some drawings tonight or, over this next week. And I may even do an art stream to fill in the colors. All right, let us hide our meowing Maestro. Story 8. The Kidnapped Prime Minister. Now that war and the problems of war are things of the past, I think I may safely venture to reveal to the world the part which my friend Poirot played in a moment of national crisis. The secret has been well guarded. Not a whisper of it reached the press. But now that the need for secrecy has gone by, I feel it is only just that England should know the debt it owes to my quaint little friend, whose marvelous brain so ably averted a great catastrophe. One evening after dinner, I will not particularize the date, it suffices to say that it was at the time when peace by negotiation was the parrot cry of England's enemies. My friend and I were sitting in his room. After being invalided out of the army, I had been given a recruiting job, and it had become my custom to drop in on Poirot in the evenings after dinner and talk with him of any cases of interest that he might have had on hand. Oh boy, they're going to be surprised in 20 years. I was attempting to discuss with him the sensational news of the day, no less than an attempted assassination of Mr. David McAdam, England's Prime Minister. The account in the paper had evidently been carefully censored. No details were given, save that the Prime Minister had had a marvelous escape, the bullet just grazing his cheek. I considered that our police must have been shamefully careless for such an outrage to be possible. I could well understand that the German agents in England would be willing to risk much for an achievement. Fighting Mac, as his own party had nicknamed him, had strenuously and unequivocally combated the pacifist influence which was becoming so prevalent. He was more than England's Prime Minister. He was England, and to have removed him from his sphere of influence would have been a crushing and paralyzing blow to Britain. Poirot was busy mopping a grey suit with a minute sponge. Never was there a dandy such as Hercule Poirot. Neatness and order were his passion. Now, with the odor of benzene filling the air, he was quite unable to give me his full attention. In a little minute I am with you, my friend. I have all but finished. The grease spot is not good. I remove him so. He waved his sponge. I smiled and I lit another cigarette. Anything interesting on? I inquired after a minute or two. I assist how do you call it, charlady to find her husband. Difficult affair, needing the tact. For I have a little idea that when he is found he will not be pleased. What would you do? For my part, I sympathize with him. He was a man of discrimination to lose himself. I laughed. At last, the grease spot is gone. I am at your disposal. I was asking you what you thought of this attempt to assassinate McAdam. Enfantillage, replied Poirot promptly. One can hardly take it seriously. To fire with the rifle, never does it succeed. It is a device of the past. It was very near succeeded this time, I reminded him. Poirot shook his head impatiently. He was about to reply when the landlady thrust her head round the door and informed him that there were 2 gentlemen below who wanted to see him. They won't give their names, sir, but they says as it's very important. Let them mount, said Poirot, carefully folding his grey trousers. In a few minutes the 2 visitors were ushered in, and my heart gave a leap as in the foremost I recognized no less a personage than Lord Estair, leader of the House of Commons, whilst his companion, Mr. Bernard Dodge, was also a member of the War Cabinet, and, as I knew, a close personal friend of the Prime Minister's. Monsieur Poirot, said Lord Estair interrogatively. My friend bowed. The great man looked at me and hesitated. My business is private. You may speak freely before Captain Hastings, said my friend, nodding to me to remain. He has not all the gifts, no, but I answer for his discretion. Lord Estair still hesitated, but Mr. Dodge broke in abruptly. Oh, come on, don't let's beat around the bush. As far as I can see, the whole of England will know the hole we're in soon enough. Time's everything. Pray be seated, messieurs, said Poirot politely. Will you take the big chair, my lord? Lord Estair started slightly. You know me? Poirot smiled. Certainly, I read the little papers with the pictures. How should I not know you? Monsieur Poirot, I have come to consult you upon a matter of the most vital urgency. I must ask for absolute secrecy. You have the word of Hercule Poirot. I can say no more, said my friend grandiloquently. It concerns the Prime Minister. We are in grave trouble. We're up a tree, interposed Mr. Dodge. The injury is serious, then? I asked. What injury? The bullet wound. Oh, that, cried Mr. Dodge contemptuously. That's old history. As my colleague says, continued Lord Astaire, that affair is over and done with. Luckily it failed. I wish I could say as much for the second attempt. There's been a second attempt, then? Yes, though not of the same nature, Monsieur Poirot. The Prime Minister has disappeared. What? He has been kidnapped. Impossible, I cried, stupefied. Poirot threw a withering glance at me, which I knew enjoined me to keep my mouth shut. Unfortunately, impossible as it seems, it is only too true, continued his lordship. Poirot looked at Mr. Dodge. You said just now, messieurs, that time has everything. What did you mean by that? The two men exchanged glances, and then Lord Astaire said, You have heard, Monsieur Poirot, of the approaching Allied Conference? My friend nodded. For obvious reasons, no details have been given of when and where it is to take place, but although it has been kept out of the newspaper, the date is, of course, widely known in diplomatic circles. The conference is to be held tomorrow, Thursday evening at Versailles. Now you perceive the terrible gravity of the situation. I will not conceal from you that the Prime Minister's presence at the conference is a vital necessity. The pacifist propaganda, started and maintained by the German agents in our midst, has been very active. It is the universal opinion that the turning point of the conference will be the strong personality of the Prime Minister. His absence may have the most serious results, possibly a premature and disastrous peace, and we have no one who can be sent in his place. He alone can represent England. Poirot's face had grown very grave. Then you regard the kidnapping of the Prime Minister as a direct attempt to prevent his being present at the conference? Most certainly I do. He was actually on his way to France at the time. And the conference is to be held? At 9 o'clock tomorrow night. Poirot drew an enormous watch from his pocket. It is now 9:15. 24 hours, said Mr. Dodge thoughtfully. And a quarter, amended Poirot. Do not forget the quarter, messieurs. It may come in useful. Now for the details. The abduction. Did it take place in England or in France? In France. Mr. McAdams crossed to France this morning. He was to stay tonight as the guest of the Commander-in-Chief, proceeding tomorrow to Paris. He was conveyed across the Channel by destroyer. At Boulogne, he was met by a car from General Headquarters and one of the Commander-in-Chief's ADCs. Eh bien? Well, they started from Boulogne, but they never arrived. What? Monsieur Poirot was a bogus car and a bogus ADC. The real car was found in a side road with the chauffeur and the ADC neatly gagged and bound. And the bogus car is still at large. Poirot made a gesture of impatience. Incredible. Surely it cannot escape attention for long. So we thought. It seemed merely a question of searching thoroughly. That part of France is under military law. They were convinced that the car could not go long unnoticed. The French police and our own Scotland Yard men and the military are straining every nerve. It is, as you say, incredible, but nothing has been discovered. At that moment a tap came to the door, and a young officer entered with a heavily sealed envelope, which he handed to Lord Astaire. Just through from France, sir. I brought it on here, as you directed. The minister tore it open eagerly and uttered an exclamation. The officer withdrew. Here is news at last. This telegram has been decoded. They have found the second car, also the secretary, Daniels, chloroformed, gagged, and bound, in an abandoned farm near C. He remembers nothing except something being pressed against his mouth, a nose from behind, and struggling to free himself. The police are satisfied as to the genuineness of his statement. And they have found nothing else? No. Not the Prime Minister's dead body? Then there is hope. But it is strange. Why, after trying to shoot him this morning, are they now taking so much trouble to keep him alive? Dodge shook his head. One thing's quite certain. They're determined at all costs to prevent his attending the conference. If it is humanly possible, the Prime Minister shall be there. God grant it is not too late. Now, messieurs, recount to me everything from the beginning. I must know about this shooting affair as well. Last night, the Prime Minister, accompanied by one of his secretaries, Captain Daniels, the same who accompanied him to France? Yes, as I was saying, they motored down to Windsor, where the Prime Minister was granted an audience. Early this morning he returned to town, and it was on the way that the attempted assassination took place. One moment, if you please. Who is this Captain Daniels? You have his dossier? Lord Astaire smiled. I thought you would ask me that. We do not know very much of him. He is of no particular family. He has served in the English army, and is an extremely able secretary, being an exceptionally fine linguist. I believe he speaks 7 languages. It is for that reason that the Prime Minister chose him to accompany him to France. Has he any relatives in England? 2 aunts, a Mrs. Everard, who lives in Hampstead, and a Miss Daniels, who lives near Ascot. Ascot? That is near Windsor, is it not? That point has not been overlooked, but it has led to nothing. Do you regard the Captain Daniels, then, as above suspicion? A shade of bitterness crept into Lord Astaire's voice as he replied, No, Monsieur Poirot, in these days I should hesitate before I pronounced anyone above suspicion. Très bien. Now I understand, milord, that the Prime Minister would, as a matter of course, be under vigilant police protection, which ought to render any assault upon him an impossibility. Lord Astaire bowed his head. That is so. The Prime Minister's car was closely followed by another car containing detectives in plain clothes. Mr. McAdam knew nothing of these precautions. He is personally a most fearless man and would be inclined to sweep them away arbitrarily. But naturally, the police make their own arrangements. In fact, the Premier's chauffeur, O'Murphy, is a CID man. O'Murphy? That is a name of Ireland, is it not? Yes, he is an Irishman. From what part of Ireland? County Clare, I believe. Tiens, but proceed, my lord. The Premier started for London. The car was a closed one. He and Captain Daniels sat inside. The second car followed as usual, but unluckily, for some unknown reason, the Prime Minister's car deviated from the main road. Point where the road curves? Interrupted Poirot. Yes, but how did you know that? Oh, c'est évident. Continue. For some unknown reason, continued Lord Astaire, the Premier's car left the main road. The police car, unaware of the deviation, continued to keep to the high road. At a short distance down the unfrequented lane, the Prime Minister's car was suddenly held up by a band of masked men. The chauffeur, that brave O'Murphy, murmured Poirot thoughtfully. The chauffeur, momentarily taken aback, jammed on his brakes. The Prime Minister put his head out of the window. Instantly a shot rang out, then another. The first one grazed his cheek. The second, fortunately, went wide. The chauffeur, now realizing the danger, instantly forged straight ahead, scattering the band of men. A near escape, I ejaculated with a shiver. Mr. McAdam refused to make any fuss over the slight wound he had received. He declared it was only a scratch. He stopped at a local cottage hospital where it was dressed and bound up. He did not, of course, reveal his identity. He then drove, as per schedule, straight to Charing Cross, where a special train for Dover was awaiting him, and, after a brief account of what had happened, had been given to the anxious police by Captain Daniels, he duly departed for France. At Dover he went on board the waiting destroyer. At Bologna, as you know, the bogus car was waiting for him, carrying the Union Jack, and correct in every detail. That is all you have to tell me? Yes. There is no other circumstance that you have omitted, my lord? Well, there is one thing, a rather peculiar thing. Yes? The Prime Minister's car did not return home after leaving the Prime Minister at Charing Cross. The police were anxious to interview O'Murphy, so a search was instituted at once. The car was discovered standing outside a certain unsavory little restaurant in Soho, which is well known as a meeting place for German agents. And the chauffeur? The chauffeur was nowhere to be found. He, too, had disappeared. So, said Poirot thoughtfully, there are two disappearances, the Prime Minister in France and O'Murphy in London. He looked keenly at Lord Astaire, who made a gesture of despair. I can only tell you, Monsieur Poirot, that if anyone had suggested to me yesterday that O'Murphy was a traitor, I should have laughed in his face. And today? Today I do not know what to think. Poirot nodded gravely. He looked at his turnip of a watch again. I understand that I have carte blanche, messieurs, in every way, I mean. I must be able to go where I choose and how I choose. Perfectly. There is a special train leaving for Dover in an hour's time, with a further contingent from Scotland Yard. You shall be accompanied by a military officer and a CID man who will hold themselves at your disposal in every way. Is that satisfactory? Quite. One more question before you leave, messieurs. What made you come to me? I am unknown, obscure in this great London of yours. We sought you out on the express recommendation and wish of a very great man of your own country. Comment? My old friend the Préfet? Lord Astaire shook his head. One higher than the Préfet. One whose word was once law in Belgium, and shall it begin? That England has sworn. Oh, and shall be again. Poirot's hand flew swiftly to a dramatic salute. Amen to that. But my master does not forget. Messieurs, I, Hercule Poirot, will serve you faithfully. Heaven only send that it will be in time, but it is dark. I cannot see. Well, Poirot, I cried impatiently as the door closed behind the ministers, what do you think? My friend was busy packing a minute suitcase with quick, deft moments, not dreft. I think that's a brand. With quick, deft movements. He shook his head thoughtfully. I don't know what to think. My brain deserts me. Why, as you said, kidnap him when a knock on the head would do as well, I mused. Pardon me, mon ami, but I did not quite say that. It is undoubtedly far more than their affair to kidnap him. But why? I still have break Kitty up. Oh, I do? That's strange. Is it working now? Because I had switched it. Okay. So that's. Let me know if it didn't switch over to the English countryside picture. Where are we? Pardon me, mon ami, but I did not quite say that. It is undoubtedly far more their affair to kidnap him. But why? Because uncertainty creates panic. That is one reason. Were the Prime Minister dead, it would be a terrible calamity, but the situation would have to be faced. But now you have paralysis. Will the Prime Minister reappear, or will he not? Is he dead or alive? Nobody knows. And until they know, nothing definite can be done. And as I tell you, uncertainty breeds panic, which is what les Boches are playing for. Then again, if the kidnappers are holding him secretly somewhere, they have the advantage of being able to make terms with both sides. The German government is not a liberal paymaster as a rule, but no doubt they can be made to disgorge substantial remittances in such a case as this. Thirdly, they run no risk of the hanger's rope, decidedly kidnapping is their affair. Then, if that is so, why should they first try to shoot him? Poirot made a gesture of anger. That is just what I do not understand. It is inexplicable, stupid. They have all their arrangements made, and very good arrangements too, for the abduction, and yet they imperil the whole affair by a melodramatic attack, worthy of a cinema, and quite as unreal. It is almost impossible to believe in it, with its band of masked men not 20 miles from London. Oh, hey, Obvious, good to see you. I'm glad you could make it for story time. We're halfway through our first one. It's pretty late for you, isn't it? So, having some bedtime reading. Oh, thank you so much for the subscription. I hope you enjoy your emotes. Oh, okay. So, doing an early rise then. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's long time coming. I should have put the goal up a long time ago. Let's see. I'm going to continue. Where were we? And then I'll chat between chapter breaks or between stories. Let's see. Oh, yes. We are at the end of a paragraph. Perhaps they were two quite separate attempts which happened irrespectively of each other, I suggested. Oh, okay. Thank you so much for popping in. And if you can't stay, totally understand. This will be on VOD and then it will be on YouTube tomorrow. No, that would be too much of a coincidence. Then further, who is the traitor? There must have been a traitor. In the first affair, anyway. But who was it? Daniels or Murphy? It must have been one of the two. And why did the car leave the main road? We cannot suppose that the Prime Minister connived at his own assassination. Did O'Murphy take that turning of his own accord, or was it Daniels who told him to do so? Surely it must have been O'Murphy's doing. Yes, because if it was Daniels, the Prime Minister would have heard the order, and would have asked the reason. But there are altogether too many whys in this affair, and they contradict each other. If O'Murphy is an honest man, why did he leave the main road? But if he was a dishonest man, why did he start the car again when only 2 shots had been fired, thereby, in all probability, saving the Prime Minister's life? And again, if he was honest, why did he, immediately on leaving Charing Cross, drive to a well-known rendezvous of German spies? It looks bad, I said. Let us look at the case with method. What have we for and against these 2 men? Take O'Murphy first. Against that his conduct in leaving the main road was suspicious, that he is an Irishman from County Clare, that he has disappeared in a highly suggestive manner. 4. That his promptness in restarting the car saved the Prime Minister's life, that he is a Scotland Yard man, and, obviously, from the post allotted to him, a trusted detective. Now for Daniels. There is not much against him except the fact that nothing is known of his antecedents, and that we speak too many languages for a good Englishman. Pardon me, mon ami, but as linguists you are deplorable. Now for him we have the fact that he was found gagged, bound, and chloroformed, which does not look as though we had anything to do with the matter. He might have gagged and bound himself to divert suspicion. Poirot shook his head. French police would make no mistake of that kind. Besides, once he had attained the object and the Prime Minister was safely abducted, there would not be much point in his remaining behind. His accomplices could have gagged and chloroformed him, of course, but I fail to see what object they hope to accomplish by it. He can be of little use to them now, for until the circumstances concerning the Prime Minister have cleared up, he is bound to be closely watched. Perhaps he hoped to start the police on a fake scent. Then why did he not do so? He merely asks that something was pressed over his nose and mouth, and that he remembers nothing more. There's no false scent there. It sounds remarkably like the truth. Well, I said, glancing at the clock, I suppose we'd better start for the station. You may find more clues in France. Possibly, mon ami, but I doubt it. It is still incredible to me that the Prime Minister has not been discovered in that limited area, where the difficulty of concealing him must be tremendous. If the military and the police of two countries have not found him, how shall I? At Charing Cross we were met by Mr. Dodge. This is Detective Barnes of Scotland Yard and Major Norman. They will hold themselves entirely at your disposal. Good luck to you. It's a bad business, but I've not given up hope. Must be off now, said the minister, and the minister strode rapidly away. We chatted in a desultory fashion, with Major Norman in the center of the little group of men. On the platform I recognized a little ferret-faced fellow talking to a small, fair man. He was an old acquaintance of Poirot's, Detective Inspector Japp, supposed to be one of the smartest of Scotland Yard's officers. Not affairs. He came over and greeted my friend cheerfully. I heard that you were on this job too. Smart bit of work. So far they've got away with the goods all right, but I can't believe they can keep him hidden long. Our people are going through France with a tooth comb. So are the French. I can't help feeling it's only a matter of hours away. That is, if he's still alive, remarked the tall detective gloomily. Japp's face fell. Well, but somehow I've got the feeling he's still alive all right. Poirot nodded. Yes, he's alive. But can he be found in time? I, like you, did not believe he could be hidden so long. The whistle blew, and we all trooped up into the Pullman carriage. Then, with a slow, unwilling jerk, the train drew out of the station. It was a curious journey. The Scotland Yard men crowded together, maps of northern France were spread out, and eager forefingers traced the lines of roads and villages. Each man had his own pet theory. Poirot showed none of his usual loquacity. Loquacity? We'll go with loquacity. But sat staring in front of him with an expression of his face that reminded me of a puzzled child. I talked to Norman, whom I found quite an amusing fellow. On arriving at Dover, Poirot's behavior moved me to intense amusement. The little man, as he went on board the boat, clutched desperately at my arm. The wind was blowing lustily. Mon Dieu, he murmured, this is terrible. Have courage, Poirot, I cried. You will succeed. You will find him, I'm sure of it. Ah, mon ami, mistake my emotion. Oh, it is this villainous sea that troubles me. The mal de mer. It is horrible suffering. Seasickness. Oh, I said, rather taken aback. The first throb of the engines was felt, and Poirot groaned and closed his eyes. Major Norman has a map of northern France if you would like to study it. Poirot shook his head impatiently. But no. Leave me, my friend. To think the stomach and the brain must be in harmony. Laveguard has a method most excellent for averting the mal de mer. You breathe in and out slowly so, turning the head from left to right and counting 6 between each breath. I left him to his I left him to his gymnastic endeavors and went on deck. As we came slowly into Boulogne harbor, Poirot appeared, neat and smiling, and announced to me in a whisper that Laverguire's system had succeeded to a marvel. Japp's forefinger was still tracing imaginary routes on his map. Nonsense! The car started from Boulogne. They branched off. Now, my idea is that they transferred the Prime Minister to another car, see? Well, said the tall detective, shall make for the seaports. 10 to 1 they've smuggled him on board a ship. Japp shook his head. Too obvious. The order went out at once to close all the ports. The day was just breaking as we landed. Major Norman touched Poirot on the arm. There's a military car here waiting for you, sir. Thank you, monsieur, but for the moment I do not propose to leave Boulogne. What? No, we will enter this hotel here, by the quay. He suited the action to the word, demanded, and was accorded a private room. We 3 followed him, puzzled and uncomprehending. He shot a quick glance at us. It is not so that the good detective should act, eh? I perceive your thought. He must be full of energy. He must rush to and fro. He should prostrate himself on the dusty road and seek the marks of tires through the little glass. He must gather up the cigarette ends, the fallen match. That is your idea, is it not? His eyes challenged us. But I, Hercule Poirot, tell you that it is not so. The true clues are within. Here. He tapped his forehead. See you, I need not have left London. It would have been sufficient for me to sit quietly in my rooms here. All that matters is the little grey cells within. Secretly and silently they do their part, until suddenly I call for a map, and I lay my finger on a spot. So, and I say, the Prime Minister is there, and it is so. With method and logic, only one can accomplish anything. This frantic rushing to France was a mistake. It is playing a child's game of hide-and-seek. But now, though it may be too late, I will set to work the right way, from within. Silence, my friends, I beg of you. And for 5 long hours the little man sat motionless, blinking his eyelids like a cat, his green eyes flickering and becoming steadily greener and greener. The Scotland Yard man was obviously contemptuous. Major Norman was bored and impatient, and I myself found the time passing with wearisome slowness. Finally I got up and strolled as noiselessly as I could to the window. The matter was becoming a farce. I was secretly concerned for my friend. If he failed, I would have preferred him to fail in a less ridiculous manner. Out of the window I idly watched the daily leave boat belching forth columns of smoke as she lay alongside the quay. Suddenly I was aroused by Poirot's voice close to my elbow. "Mes amis, let us start." I turned. An extraordinary transformation had come over my friend. His eyes were flickering with excitement. His chest was swelling to the utmost. "I have been an imbecile, my friends, but I see daylight at last." Major Norman moved hastily to the door. "I'll order the car." "There's no need. I shall not use it. Thank heaven the wind has fallen." "Do you mean you are going to walk, sir?" "No, my young friend. I am no Saint Peter. I prefer to cross the sea by boat." "To cross the sea?" "Yes. To work with method, one must begin from the beginning, and the beginning of this affair was in England. Therefore, we return to England." Part 2. At 3 o'clock we stood once more upon Charing Cross platform. To all our expostulations, Poirot turned a deaf ear and reiterated again and again that to start at the beginning was not a waste of time, but the only way. On the way over, he had conferred with Norman in a low voice, and the latter had dispatched a sheaf of telegrams from Dover. Owing to the special passes held by Norman, we got through everywhere in record time. In London, a large police car was waiting for us with some plainclothesmen, one of whom handed a typewritten sheet of paper to my friend. He answered my inquiring glance. List of the cottage hospitals within a certain radius west of London. I wired for it from Dover. We were whirled rapidly through the London streets. We were on the Bath Road. On we went through Hammersmith, Chiswick, and Bedford. I began to see our objective. Through Windsor and so on to Ascot. My friend gave a leap. Ascot was where Daniels had an aunt living. We were after him then, not O'Murphy. We duly stopped at the gate of a trim villa. Poirot jumped out and rang the bell. I saw a perplexed frown dimming the radiance of his face. Plainly, he was not satisfied. The bell was answered, he was ushered inside. In a few moments he reappeared and climbed into the car with a short, sharp shake of his head. Nice alliteration. My hopes began to die down. It was past 4 now. Even if he found certain evidence incriminating Daniels, what would be the good of it unless we could wring from someone the exact spot in France where they were holding the Prime Minister? Our return progress towards London was an interrupted one. We deviated from the main road more than once and occasionally stopped at a small building, which I had no difficulty in recognizing as a cottage hospital. Poirot only spent a few minutes at each, but at every halt his radiant assurance was more and more restored. He whispered something to Norman, to which the latter replied, "Yes, if you turn off to the left, you will find them waiting by the bridge." We turned up a side road, and in the failing light I discerned a second car, waiting by the side of the road. It contained 2 men in plainclothes. Poirot got down and spoke to them, and then we started off in a northerly direction, the other car following close behind. We drove for some time, our objective being obviously one of the northern suburbs of London. Finally, we drove up to the front door of a tall house, standing a little back from the road in its own grounds. Norman and I were left in the car. Poirot and one of the detectives went up to the door and rang. A neat parlour-maid opened it. The detective spoke. "I'm a police officer, and I have a warrant to search this house." The girl gave a little scream, and a tall, handsome woman of middle age appeared behind her in the hall. "Shut the door, Edith. They are burglars, I expect." But Poirot swiftly inserted his foot in the door, and at the same moment blew a whistle. Instantly the other detectives ran up, poured into the house, shutting the door behind him. Norman and I spent about 5 minutes cursing our forced inactivity. Finally, the door reopened, and the men emerged, escorting 3 prisoners, a woman and 2 men. The woman and one of the men were taken to the second car. The other man was placed in our car by Poirot himself. "I must go with the others, my friend, but have great care of this gentleman. You do not know him, no? Eh bien, let me present you, Monsieur O'Murphy." O'Murphy? "Oh, hi, Angel. Good to see you. Thanks for joining. And thanks for the follow yesterday. We are getting near the... Oh, no, we still have a couple more sections in this. We're still on the first case of the day. And then we'll chat a little... I'll chat a little bit between chapters. Or between stories. O'Murphy? I gaped at him open-mouthed as we started again. He was not handcuffed, but I did not fancy he would try to escape. He sat there staring in front of him as though dazed. Anyway, Norman and I would be more than a match for him. To my surprise, we still kept a northerly route. We were not returning to London then. I was much puzzled. Suddenly, as the car slowed down, I recognized that we were close to Hendon Aerodrome. Immediately, I grasped Poirot's idea. He proposed to reach France by aeroplane. It was a sporting idea, but on the face of it, impracticable. A telegram would be far quicker. Time was everything. He must leave the personal glory of rescuing the Prime Minister to others. As we drew up, Major Norman jumped out, and a plainclothesman took his place. He conferred with Poirot for a few minutes, and then went off briskly. I, too, jumped out, and caught Poirot by the arm. "I congratulate you, old fellow. They have told you the hiding place? But here, look. You must wire to France at once. You'll be too late if you go yourself." Poirot looked at me curiously for a minute or two. "Unfortunately, my friend, there are some things that cannot be sent by telegram." All right, we're at a chapter break, so I'm quickly going to... Oops, that wasn't the right... Yeah, there are all my socials, if you wanted to join any of those. And my Goodreads account is, I still have to work on it more. I'm a bit behind on that. Part 3. Oh, thank you. I will. I'll have to show you a picture of my my Christmas dream mug. It's cute. One of my past coworkers got it for me a few years ago, and it's so cute. Ooh, new pet picture. Ooh, I'm excited to see that. All right, part 3. At that moment, Major Norman returned, accompanied by a young officer in the uniform of the Flying Corps. "This is Captain Lyle, who will fly you over to France. He can start at once." "Wrap up warmly, sir," said the young pilot. "I can lend you a coat if you like." Poirot was consulting his enormous watch. He muttered to himself, "Yes, there is time. Just time." Then he looked up and bowed politely to the young officer. "I thank you, monsieur, but it is not I who am your passenger. It is this gentleman here." He moved a little aside as he spoke, and a figure came forward out of the darkness. It was the second male prisoner who had gone in the other car, and as the light fell on his face, I gave a start of surprise. It was the Prime Minister. Section 4. "For heaven's sake, tell me all about it," I cried impatiently as Poirot, Norman, and I motored back to London. "How in the world did they manage to smuggle him back to England?" "There was no need to smuggle him back," replied Poirot dryly. "The Prime Minister has never left England. He was kidnapped on his way from Windsor to London." "What?" "I will make all clear. The Prime Minister was in his car, his secretary beside him. Suddenly a pad of chloroform is clapped on his face." "By whom?" "By the clever linguist, Captain Daniels. As soon as the Prime Minister is unconscious, Daniel picks up the speaking tube and directs O'Murphy to turn to the right, which the chauffeur, quite unsuspicious, does. A few yards down that unfrequented road, a large car is standing, apparently broken down. Its driver signals to O'Murphy to stop. O'Murphy slows up. The stranger approaches. Daniels leans out of the window, and probably with the aid of an instantaneous anesthetic such as ethyl chloride and chloroform, as chloroform trick is repeated. Oh, hang on a second. The chloroform trick was repeated. In a few seconds, the two helpless men are dragged out and transferred to the other car, and a pair of substitutes take their place. Impossible! But two, have you not seen music hall? turns, imitating celebrities with marvelous accuracy. Nothing is easier than to personate a public character. The Prime Minister of England is far easier to understudy than Mr. John Smith of Clapham, say. As for O'Murphy's double, no one was going to take much notice of him until after the departure of the Prime Minister, and by then he would have made himself scarce. He drives straight from Charing Cross to the meeting place of his friends. He goes in as O'Murphy. He emerges as someone quite different. O'Murphy has disappeared, leaving a conveniently suspicious trail behind him. But the man who personated the Prime Minister was seen by everyone. He was not seen by anyone who knew him privately or intimately, and Daniels shielded him from contact with anyone as much as possible. Moreover, his face was banged up, and anything unusual in his manner would be put down to the fact that he was suffering from shock as a result of the attempt upon his life. Mr. McAdams has a weak throat and always spares his voice as much as possible before any great speech. The deception was perfectly easy to come up with as far as France. There it would be impracticable and impossible, so the Prime Minister disappears. The police of this country hurry along across the channel, and no one bothers to go into the details of the first attack. To sustain the illusion that the abduction has taken place in France, Daniels is gagged and chloroformed in a convincing manner. And the man who has enacted the part of the Prime Minister rids himself of his disguise. He and the bogus chauffeur may be arrested as suspicious characters, but no one will dream of suspecting their real part in the drama, and they would eventually be released for lack of evidence. The real Prime Minister. He and O'Murphy were driven straight to the house of Mrs. Everard at Hampstead, Daniel's so-called aunt. In reality, she is Frau Bertha Ebenthal, and the police have been looking for her for some time. It is a valuable little present that I have made them, to say nothing of Daniels. It was a clever plan, but he did not reckon on the cleverness of Hercule Poirot. I think my friend might well be excused his moment of vanity. When did you first begin to suspect the truth of matter? When I began to work the right way, from within. I could not make that shooting affair fit in, but when I saw that the net result of it was that the Prime Minister went to France with his face bound up, I began to comprehend. And when I visited all the cottage hospitals between Windsor and London, and found that no one answering to my description had had his face bound up and dressed that morning, I was sure. After that, it was child's play for a mind like mine. The following morning, Poirot showed me a telegram he had received. It had no place of origin and was unsigned. It ran, "In time." Later in the day, the evening papers published an account of the Allied conference. They had laid particular stress on the magnificent ovation according to Mr. David McAdam, whose inspiring speech had produced a deep and lasting impression. All right, putting Maestro back up. So how are you doing today, Angel? Are you going to be streaming it all today? Ooh, and I want to see whose pet pictures they put up. Oh. Cute dog, obvious. Love it. And thank you for posting that up. I love pet pictures. It's the most important part of any Discord, I believe. Oh, and in case you are new to the stream, these are my two cats. Of course, the Tuxie one that I have right here in the middle, I have him up when I'm taking chapter breaks, just so if you're watching the VOD or the YouTube, if you want to skip all of the chatty parts, you just wait until you see him go away. And then in this little picture here, we have, of course, Maestro sleeping on the shelf and Snockings sniffing his tail. Oh no, sorry, I have Nightbot up on high, the moderator thing on high, just because, you know, I like the chat to be all ages, and unfortunately I don't know how to turn off the emote spamming, because I personally don't think emote spamming is too bad unless it just like takes over the whole chat. So I'm sorry about that deleted, those being deleted. So I missed what you said. I'm sorry, Angel. It is funny to see what Nightbot says, though. Sometimes you scare me. Oh, okay. Oh, thank you. I don't have a hype emote. I should try to figure out something to do for a hype emote. Those are cute. All right, and oh, hang on a second. What is this? Oh, nice. Yeah, I had pondered, like, if I should hire somebody to do my emotes or to make them myself, but I kind of, like, I like drawing, and this has gotten me back into drawing, so I decided I would try to make my own emotes and other art. I haven't done an art stream in a little while. So, yeah. Thank you. Let me see. Yeah, there we go. I'm doing, well, okay. Unfortunately, woke up with a headache because the allergens have been bad where I am. We got like just 2 rains, and they weren't like big rains. Still very dry. So much dust, so much allergens, so I woke with a headache. But, yeah, normally I wouldn't stream if I have a headache, but story times are nice and chill and stuff, so I can do that. How are you doing? And I hope that the COVID situation where you are is nice and low. It sadly is not here, hasn't been. I think I hear one of my cats licking the furniture in the other room. Could be either one. Oh no. Yeah, styes are so annoying. I've had them, I actually used to have them many, many times, and then I stopped wearing makeup and all got better. Oof. Wow. Yeah, I'm really hoping that people will start to realize that, yeah. Oh, that's good. I know that, do you have cedars in Missouri? I, by the way, am in Northern California. I was just thinking that because, like, one time, well, a couple of times, like, somebody has woken up with a swollen eye, and it was like because I guess cedar pollen or sap or something like that, something to do with it. But yeah, I hate waking up with those mysterious swellings. Not fun. But I'm glad that it's gone down. That's a relief, definitely. Have you been putting some cool compresses on it? Or warm compresses, but I personally like cool better for swelling. I like cool better anyways. Yeah, the COVID situation here has really drastically. Ooh, nice. Oh, I like that. Because, yeah, that'll draw out any, like, infections or anything like that. Yeah. Plus, you get to drink green tea, which all, right there is delicious. I really like, my favorite green tea is, there's a brand named Numi. Love Numi. And they have a jasmine green tea that is so beautiful. It's delicate. I stopped drinking my tea with honey and like drinking that and the Earl Grey and the Lady Grey. I don't even miss the honey. My teeth definitely don't miss the honey, I can tell you that. Oh, that's a bummer. Yeah. I've always, been very thankful for living in California because we do have a lot of variety here. Like, even I live in the boonies, in one of the not very populated areas. Though for a small town, it is pretty populated. But, it's great if you have food allergies because there are alternatives everywhere. Unfortunately, there's not really alternatives to the airborne allergies, so boo. I know that some companies, like you can order directly through them. Like my sister doesn't have caffeine, and so we order the decaf Lady Grey directly from Twinings, and it's really nice. Although we have a lot left of some tea that we don't drink anymore that I ordered. Yeah, but I'd say like if you can order like like a tester thing from Numi, you should check them out because they are really good. All right, I think I'm going to get back to reading. We're about to read our second story. And no, that's not the thing that I want to do. There we go. All right. Story 9, The Disappearance of Mr. Davenheim. There we go. Poirot and I were expecting our old friend Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard to tea. We were sitting round the tea table, waiting his arrival. Poirot had just finished carefully straightening the cups and saucers which our landlady was in the habit of throwing rather than placing on the table. He had also breathed heavily on the metal teapot and polished it with a silk handkerchief. The kettle was on the boil, and a small enamel saucepan beside it contained some thick, sweet chocolate, which was more of Poirot's palate than what he described as your English poison. A sharp rat-tat sounded below, and a few minutes afterwards Japp entered briskly. "Hope I'm not too late," he said as he greeted us. "To tell the truth, I was yarning with Miller, the man who's in charge with the Davenheim case." I pricked up my ears. For the last 3 days the papers had been full of the strange disappearance of Mr. Davenheim, senior partner of Davenheim and Salmon, the well-known bankers and financiers. On Saturday last he had walked out of his house and had never been seen since. I looked forward to extracting some interesting details from Japp. I should have thought, I remarked, that it would be almost impossible for anyone to disappear nowadays. Poirot moved a plate of bread and butter the eighth of an inch, and said sharply, "Be exact, my friend. What do you mean by disappear? To which class of disappearances are you referring?" "Are disappearances classified and labeled, then?" I laughed. Japp smiled also. Poirot frowned at both of us. "But certainly they are. They fall into 3 categories. First, and most common, the voluntary disappearance. Second, the much abused loss of memory case, rare but occasionally genuine. Third, murder and a more or less successful disposal of the body. Do you refer to all 3 as impossible of execution?" "Very nearly so, I should think. You might lose your own memory, but someone would be sure to recognize you, especially in the case of a well-known man like Davenheim. Then bodies can't be made to vanish into thin air. Sooner or later they turn up, concealed in lonely places or in trunks. Murder will out. In the same way, the absconding clerk or the domestic defaulterer, it is bound to be run down in these days of wireless telegraphy. He can be headed off from foreign countries. Ports and railway stations are watched, and as for the concealment in his country, his features and appearance will be known to anyone who studies a daily newspaper. He's up against civilization. Just wait until 100 years from now, people. That will blow your mind." "Mon ami," said Poirot, "you make one error. You do not allow for the fact that a man who has decided to make away with another man, or with himself in a figurative sense, might be that rare machine, a man of method. He might bring intelligence, talent, a careful calculation of detail in the task, and then I do not see why he should not be successful in baffling the police force." "But not you, I suppose," said Japp good-humoredly, winking at me. "He could baffle you, eh, Monsieur Poirot?" "Oh, he couldn't." Poirot endeavored, with a marked lack of success, to look modest. "Me also. Why not? It is true that I approach such problems with an exact science, a mathematical precision, which seems, alas, only too rare in the new generation of detectives." Japp grinned more widely. "I don't know," he said. "Miller's the man who's on this case. Is a smart chap. You may be very sure he won't overlook a footprint, or a cigar ash, or a crumb even. He's got eyes that see everything." "So, mon ami," said Poirot, "has the London sparrow, but all the same, I should not ask the little brown bird to solve the problem of Mr. Davenheim." "Come now, Poirot, you're not going to run down the value of details as clues." "By no means. These things are all good in their way. The danger is they may assume undue importance. Most details are insignificant. 1 or 2 are vital. It is the brain, the little grey cells," he tapped his forehead, "on which one must rely. The senses mislead. One must seek the truth within, not without." "You don't mean to say, Monsieur Poirot, that you would undertake to solve a case without moving from your chair, do you?" "That is exactly what I do mean. Granted the facts were placed before me, I regard myself as a consulting specialist." Japp slapped his knee. "Hanged if I don't take you at your word. Bet you a fiver that you can't lay your hand, or rather tell me where to lay my hand, on Mr. Davenheim, dead or alive, before a week is out." Poirot considered. "Eh bien, mon ami, I accept. Le sport. It is the passion of you English. Now, the facts. On Saturday last, as in his usual custom, Mr. Davenheim took the 12:40 train from Victoria to Chingside. There is palatial country seat, where his palatial country seat, the Cedars, is situated. After lunch he strolled round the grounds and gave various directions to the gardeners. Everybody agrees that his manner was absolutely normal, and as usual after tea, he put his head into his wife's boudoir, saying that he was going to stroll down to the village and post some letters. He added that he was expecting a Mr. Lohman on business. If he should come before he himself returned, he was to be shown into the study and asked to wait. Mr. Davenheim then left the house by the front door, passed leisurely down the drive and out at the gate, and was never seen again. From that hour he vanished completely. Pretty, very pretty. Altogether a charming little problem, murmured Poirot. Proceed, my good friend. About a quarter of an hour later, a tall, dark man with a thick black mustache rang the front door-bell and explained that he had an appointment with Mr. Davenheim. He gave the name of Lowen, and, in accordance with the banker's instructions, was shown into the study. Nearly an hour passed. Mr. Davenheim did not return. Finally, Mr. Lowen rang the bell and explained that he was unable to wait any longer, as he must catch his train back to town. Mrs. Davenheim apologized for her husband's absence, which seemed unaccountable, as she knew him to have been expecting a visitor. Mr. Lowen reiterated his regrets and took his departure. While, as everyone knows, Mr. Davenheim did not return. Early on Sunday morning the police were communicated with, but could make neither head nor tail of the matter. Mr. Davenheim seemed literally to have vanished into thin air. He had not been to the post office, nor had he been seen passing through the village. At the station they were positive he had not departed by any train. His own motor had not left the garage. If he had hired a car to meet him in some lonely spot, it seems almost certain that by this time, in view of the large reward offered for information, the driver of it would have come forward to tell of what he knew. True, there was a small race meeting at Entfield, 5 miles away, and if he had walked to that station, he might have passed unnoticed in the crowd. But since then his photograph and a full description of him have been circulated in every newspaper, and nobody has been able to give any news of him. We have, of course, received many letters from all over England, but each clue, so far, has ended in disappointment. On Monday morning, a further sensational discovery came to light. Behind a portiere in Mr. Davenheim's study stands a safe, and that safe had been broken into and rifled. The windows were fastened securely from the inside, which seemed to put an ordinary burglary out of court, unless, of course, an accomplice within the house fastened them again afterwards. On the other side, Sunday having intervened, and the household being in a state of chaos, it is likely that the burglary was committed on the Saturday and remained undetected until Monday. Précisément, said Poirot dryly. Where is he arrested, ce pauvre Monsieur Lowen? Jap grinned. Not yet, but he's under pretty close supervision. Poirot nodded. What was taken from the safe? Have you any idea? We've been going into that with the junior partner of the firm, Miss and Mrs. Davenheim. Apparently there was a considerable amount in bearer bonds and a very large sum in notes, owing to some large transaction having been just carried through. There was also a small fortune in jewelry. All Mrs. Davenheim's jewels were kept in the safe. The purchasing of them had become a passion with her husband of late years, and hardly a month passed that he did not make her a present of some rare and costly gem. Altogether a good haul, said Poirot thoughtfully. Now what about Lowen? Is it known what his business was with Davenheim that evening? Well, the two men were apparently not on very good terms. Lowen is speculator in quite a small way. Nevertheless, he has been able once or twice to score a coup off Davenheim in the market, though it seems they seldom are or never actually meet. It was a matter concerning some South American shares which led the banker to make his appointment. Had Davenheim interests in South America then? I believe so. Mrs. Davenheim happened to mention that he spent all last autumn in Buenos Aires. Any trouble in his home life? Were the husband and wife on good terms? I should say his domestic life was quite peaceful and uneventful. Mrs. Davenheim is a pleasant, rather unintelligent woman. Quite a non-entity, I think. And we must not look for the solution of the mystery there. Had he any enemies? He had plenty of financial rivals, and no doubt there were many people whom he has got the better of, or whom bear him no particular goodwill. But there was no one likely to make away with him. And if they had, where's the body? Exactly. As Hastings says, bodies have a habit of coming to light with fatal persistency. By the way, one of the gardeners says he saw a figure going round to the side of the house towards the rose garden. The long French window of the study opens on to the rose garden, and Mr. Davenheim frequently entered and left the house that way. But the man was a good way off, at work on some cucumber frames, and cannot even say whether it was a figure of his master or not. Also, he cannot fix the time with any accuracy. It must have been before 6, as the gardeners ceased work at that time. And Mr. Davenheim left the house? About 5:30 or thereabouts. What lies beyond the rose garden? A lake. With a boathouse? Yes, a couple of punts are kept there. I suppose you're thinking of suicide, Monsieur Poirot. Well, I don't mind telling you that Miller's going down tomorrow expressly to see that piece of water dredged. That's the kind of man he is. Poirot smiled faintly and turned to me. Hastings, I pray you, hand me the copy of Daily Megaphone. If I remember rightly, there is an unusually clear photograph there of the missing man. I rose and found the sheet required. Poirot studied the features attentively. He murmured. Wears his hair rather long and wavy, full moustache and pointed beard, bushy eyebrows. Eyes dark? Yes. Hair and beard turning grey. The detective nodded. Well, Monsieur Poirot, what have you got to say to all of that? Clear as daylight, eh? On the contrary, more obscure. Scotland Yard man looked pleased. Which gives me great hopes of solving it. Finished Poirot placidly. Huh? I find it a good sign when a case is obscure. The case is clear as daylight. Eh bien, mistrust it. Someone has made it so. Japp shook his head almost pityingly. Well, each to their fancy, but it's not a bad thing to see our way clear ahead. I do not see, murmured Poirot. I shut my eyes and think. Japp sighed. Well, when you've got a clear week to think in. And you will bring me any fresh developments that arise, the result of the labors of the hard-working and lynx-eyed Inspector Miller, for instance. Certainly, that's in the bargain. Seems a shame, doesn't it? Said Japp to me as I accompanied him to the door. Like robbing a child. I could not help agreeing with a smile. I was still smiling as I re-entered the room. Eh bien, said Poirot immediately. You make fun of Papa Poirot, is it not so? He shook his finger at me. You do not trust his grey cells? Ah, do not be confused. Let us discuss the little problem, incomplete as yet, I admit, but already showing 1 or 2 points of interest. The lake, I said significantly.
and even more than the lake, the boathouse." I looked sideways at Poirot. He was smiling in his most inscrutable fashion. I felt that for a moment it would be quite useless to question him further. We heard nothing of Jap until the following evening, when he walked in about 9 o'clock. I saw at once by his expression that he was bursting with news of some kind. "Eh bien, my friend," remarked Poirot, "all goes well? But do not tell me that you have discovered the body of Mr. Davenheim in your lake, because I shall not believe you." "We haven't found the body, but we did find his clothes, the identical clothes he was wearing that day. What do you say to that? Any other clothes missing from the house?" "No, his valet was quite positive on that point. The rest of his wardrobe is intact. There's more. We've arrested Lowen. One of the maids, whose business it is to fasten the bedroom windows, declares that she saw Lowen coming towards the study through the rose garden about 6:15. That would be about 10 minutes before he left the house." "What does he himself say to that?" "Denied, first of all, that he had ever left the study, but the maid was positive, and he pretended afterwards that he had forgotten just stepping out of the window to examine an unusual species of rose. Rather a weak story. And there's fresh evidence against him come to light. Mr. Davenheim always wore a thick gold ring set with a solitaire diamond on the little finger of his right hand. Well, that ring was pawned in London on Saturday night by a man called Billy Kellett. He's already known to the police. Did 3 months last autumn for lifting an old gentleman's watch. It seems he tried to pawn the ring at no less than 5 different places, succeeded at the last one, but got gloriously drunk on the proceeds, assaulted a policeman, and was run in consequence. I went to Bow Street with Miller and saw him. He's sober enough now, and I don't mind admitting we pretty well frightened the life out of him, hinting he might be charged with murder. This is his yarn, and a very queer one it is. He was at Entfield races on Saturday, though I dare say scarf pins was his line of business, rather than betting. Anyway, he had a bad day and was down on his luck. He was tramping along the road to Chingside, and sat down in a ditch to rest just before he got into the village. A few minutes later, he noticed a man coming along the road to the village. Dark-complexioned gent with a big mustache, one of them city toffs, is his description of the man. Kellett was half concealed from the road by a heap of stone. Just before he got abreast of him, the man looked quickly up and down the road, and seeing it apparently deserted, he took a small object from his pocket and threw it over the hedge. Then he went on towards the station. Now, the object he had thrown over the hedge had fallen with a slight clink, which aroused the curiosity of the human derelict in the ditch. He investigated, and after a short search, discovered the ring. That is Kellett's story. It's only fair to say that Lowen denies it utterly, and, of course, the word of a man like Kellett can't be relied upon in the slightest. It's within the bounds of possibility that he met Davenheim in the lane and robbed and murdered him. Poirot shook his head. Very improbable, mon ami. He had no means of disposing of the body. It would have been found by now. Secondly, the open way in which he pawned the ring makes it unlikely that he did murder to get it. Thirdly, your sneak friend is rarely a murderer. Fourthly, as he has been in prison since Saturday, it would be too much of a coincidence that he is able to give an accurate description of Lowen. Jap nodded. I don't say you're not right, but all the same you won't get a jury to take much note of a jailbird's evidence. What seems odd to me is that Lowen couldn't find a cleverer way of disposing of the ring. Poirot shrugged his shoulders. Well, after all, if it were found in the neighborhood, it might be argued that Davenheim himself had dropped it. But why remove it from the body at all? I cried. There might be a reason for that, said Jap. Do you know that just beyond the lake the little gate leads out onto the hills, and not 3 minutes' walk brings you to, what do you think? A lime kiln.
Okay, have a good dinner.
Good heavens, I cried. You mean that the lime which destroyed the body would be powerless to affect the metal of the ring? Exactly. It seems to me, I said, that explains everything. What a horrible crime. By common consent, we both turned and looked at Poirot. He seemed lost in reflection, his brow knitted as though with some supreme mental effort. I felt at last his keen intellect was asserting itself. What would his first words be? We were not long left in doubt. With a sigh, the tension of his attitude relaxed, and turning to Jap, he said, "Have you any idea, my friend, whether Mr. and Mrs. Davenheim occupied the same bedroom?" The question seemed so ludicrously inappropriate that for a moment we both stared in silence. Then Jap burst into a laugh. "Good Lord, Monsieur Poirot, I thought you were coming out with something startling. As to your question, I am sure I don't know." "You could find out?" said Poirot with a curious persistence. "Oh, certainly. You really want to know." "Merci, mon ami. I should be obliged if you would make a point of it." Jap stared at him a few minutes longer, but Poirot seemed to have forgotten us both. The detective shook his head sadly at me and murmured, "Poor old fellow, war's been too much for him," gently withdrew from the room. As Poirot seemed sunk in a daydream, I took a sheet of paper and amused myself by scribbling notes upon it. My friend's voice aroused me. He had come out of his reverie and was looking brisk and alert. "Que faites-vous là, mon ami?" "What are you doing there?" I was jotting down what occurred to me as the main points of interest in his affair. You become methodical at last," said Poirot approvingly. I concealed my pleasure. "Shall I read them to you?" "By all means." I cleared my throat. 1. All the evidence points to Lowen having been the man who forced the safe. 2. He had a grudge against Davenheim. 3. He lied in his first statement that he had never left the study. 4. If you accept Billy Kellett's story as true, Lowen is unmistakably implicated. I paused. "Well?" I asked, for I felt that I had put my fingers on all of the vital facts. Poirot looked at me pityingly, shook his head very gently. "Mon pauvre ami, but it is that you have not the gift, the important detail. You appreciate him never. Also, your reasoning is false." "How?" "Let me take your 4 points. 1. Mr. Lowen could not possibly know that he would have the chance to open the safe. He came for a business interview. He could not know beforehand that Mr. Davenheim would be absent posting a letter, and that he would consequently be alone in the study. He might have seized the opportunity. And the tools. City gentlemen do not carry round housebreakers' tools in the off chance, and one could not cut into that safe with a penknife. Bien entendu, sorry. Well, what about number 2? You say Lowen had a grudge against Mr. Davenheim. What you mean is that he had once or twice got the better of him, and presumably those transactions were entered into with a view of benefiting himself. In any case, you do not as a rule bear a grudge against a man you have got the better of. It is more likely to be the other way around. Whatever grudge there might have been would have been on Mr. Davenheim's side. Well, you can't deny that he lied about never having left the study. No, but he may have been frightened. Remember, the missing man's clothes had just been discovered in the lake. Of course, as usual, he would have done better to speak the truth. And the fourth point? I grant you that if Cabot's story is true, Lowen is undeniably implicated. That is what makes the affair so very interesting. Then I did appreciate one vital fact. Perhaps, but you have entirely overlooked the two most important points, the ones which undoubtedly hold the clue to the whole affair. And pray, what are they? One, the passion which has grown upon Mr. Davenheim in the last few years for buying jewelry. Two, his trip to Buenos Aires last autumn. Poirot, are you joking? I am serious. Ah, sacred thunder, but I hope Jap will not forget my little commission. But the detective, entering into the spirit of the joke, had remembered it so well that a telegram was handed to Poirot about 11 o'clock the next day. At his request, I opened it and read it over. Husband and wife have occupied separate rooms since last winter. Aha! Cried Poirot. And now we are in mid-June. All is solved. I stared at him. You have no money in the bank of Davenheim and Salmon, mon ami. No, I said, wondering. Why? Because I should advise you to withdraw it before it is too late. Why, what do you expect? I expect a big smash in a few days, perhaps sooner. Which reminds me, we will return the compliment of a dépêche to Jap. A pencil, I pray you, and a form. Voila! Advise you to withdraw any money deposited with firm in question. That will intrigue him, the good Jap. His eyes will open wide, wide. He will not comprehend in the slightest, until tomorrow or the next day. I remained skeptical, but the morrow forced me to rend tribute to my friend's remarkable powers. In every paper was a huge headline telling of the sensational failure of the Davenheim Bank. The disappearance of the famous financier took on a totally different aspect in the light of the revelation of the financial affairs of the bank. Before we were halfway through breakfast, the door flew open and Jap rushed in. In his left hand was a paper. In his right was Poirot's telegram, which he banged down on the table in front of my friend. How did you know, Monsieur Poirot? How the blazes could you know? Poirot smiled placidly at him. Oh, mon ami, after your wire, it was a certainty. From the commencement, see you, it struck me that the safe burglary was somewhat remarkable. Jewels, ready money, bearer bonds, all so conveniently arranged for whom? Well, the good Monsieur Davenheim was of those who look after number one, as your saying goes. It seems almost certain that it was arranged for himself, in his passion of late years for buying jewelry. How simple! The funds he embezzled he converted into jewels, very likely replacing them in turn with paste duplicates, and so he put away in a safe place, under another name, considerable fortune to be enjoyed all in good time, when everyone has been thrown off the track. His arrangements completed, he makes an appointment with Mr. Lowen, who has been imprudent enough in the past to cross the great man once or twice, drills a hole in the safe, leaves orders that the guest is to be shown into the study, and walks out of the house. Where? Poirot stopped and stretched out his hand for another boiled egg. He frowned. It is really insupportable, he murmured, that every hen lay an egg of a different size. What symmetry can there be on the breakfast table? At least they should sort them in dozens at the shop. Never mind the eggs, said Jap impatiently. Let 'em lay 'em square if they like. Tell us where our customer went to when he left the Cedars. That is, if you know. Eh bien, he went to his hiding place.
This Monsieur Davenheim. There must be some malformation of his grey cells, but they are of the first quality. Do you know where he is hiding? Certainly. It is most ingenious. For the Lord's sake, tell us then. Poirot gently collected every fragment of shell from his plate, placed them in the egg cup, and reserved the empty eggshell on top of them, reversed. This little operation concluded, he smiled on the neat effect and then beamed affectionately on us both. Come, my friends, you are men of intelligence. Ask yourself the question I asked myself. If I were this man, where should I hide? Hastings, what do you say? Well, I said, I'm rather inclined to think that I'd not do a bolt at all. I'd stay in London, in the heart of things, travel by tubes and buses. 10 to 1, I'd never be recognized. There's safety in a crowd. Poirot turned inquiringly to Japp. I don't agree. Get clear away at once, that's the only chance. I would have had plenty of time to prepare things beforehand. I'd have a yacht waiting, with steam up, and I'd be off to one of the most out-of-the-way corners of the world before the hue and cry began. We both looked at Poirot. What do you say, monsieur? For a moment he remained silent. Then a very curious smile flitted across his face. My friends, if I were hiding from the police, do you know where I should hide? In a prison. What? You are seeking Monsieur Davenheim in order to put him in prison, so you never dream of looking to see if he may not already be there. What do you mean? You tell me Madame Davenheim is not a very intelligent woman. Nevertheless, I think that if you took her up to Bow Street and confronted her with a man Billy Kellett, she would recognize him. In spite of the fact that he has shaved his beard and mustache and those bushy eyebrows and has cropped his hair close, a woman nearly always knows her husband, though the rest of the world may be deceived. Billy Kellett? But he's known to the police. Did I not tell you Davenheim was a clever man? He prepared his alibi long beforehand. He was not in Buenos Aires last autumn. He was creating the character of Billy Kellett, doing 3 months so that the police should have no suspicion when the time came. He was playing, remember, for a large fortune as well as liberty. It was worthwhile doing the thing thoroughly. Only... Yes? Bien, afterwards he had to wear a false beard and wig, had to make up as himself again, and to sleep with a false beard is not easy. It invites detection. He could not risk continuing to share the chamber of Madame, his wife. You found out for me that for the last 6 months, or ever since his supposed return from Buenos Aires, he and Mrs. Davenheim occupied separate rooms. Then I was sure everything fitted in. The gardener, who fancied he saw his master going round to the side of the house, was quite right. He went to the boathouse, donned his tramp clothes, which you may be sure had been safely hidden from the eyes of his valet, dropped the others in the lake, and proceeded to carry out his plan by pawning the ring in an obvious manner, and then assaulting a policeman, getting himself safely into the haven of Bow Street, where nobody would ever dream of looking for him. That's impossible, murmured Japp. Ask Madame, said my friend, smiling. The next day a registered letter lay beside Poirot's plate. He opened it, and a 5-pound note fluttered out. My friend's brow puckered. Ah, sacre! But what shall I do with it? I have much remorse. Ce pauvre Japp. Ah, an idea. We will have a little dinner, we 3. That consoles me. It was really too easy. I am ashamed. I who would not rob a child. Mille tonnerre, mon ami, what have you that you laugh so heartily? Taking a quick break again. rehydrating the vocal cords. Oh, and I don't know if you are still there, if you're lurking or anything like that, but this is the link to my YouTube, so you can watch any of the old story times. The great thing about this one is if you come in the middle of, like, the book, they're all short cases, so you can pick it up wherever. But I have them all, that is the link actually to the playlists, and I have them all in order, so you don't have to worry about finding the right one. All right. And now we're about to start the last story of the day. Let's hide Maestro again. Oh, come on. There we go. My mouse is being difficult. There we go. Story 10. The Adventure of the Italian Nobleman. Poirot and I had many friends and acquaintances of an informal nature. Amongst these was to be numbered Dr. Hawker, a near neighbor of ours, and a member of the medical profession. It was the genial doctor's habit to drop in sometimes of an evening and have a chat with Poirot, of whose genius he was an ardent admirer. The doctor himself, frank and unsuspicious to the last degree, admired the talent so far removed from his own. On one particular evening in early June, he arrived about 8:30 and settled down to a comfortable discussion on the cheery topic of the prevalence of arsenical poisoning in crimes. It must have been about a quarter of an hour later when the door of our sitting room flew open and a distracted female precipitated herself into the room. "Oh, doctor, you wanted such a terrible voice. It gave me a turn, I did indeed." I recognized in our new visitor Dr. Hawker's housekeeper, Miss Ryder. The doctor was a bachelor and lived in a gloomy old house a few streets away. The usually placid Miss Ryder was now in a state bordering on incoherence. "What terrible voice? Who is it, and what's the trouble?" "It was the telephone, doctor. I answered it, and a voice spoke. 'Help,' he said, 'doctor, help, they've killed me.' Then it sort of tailed away. 'Who's speaking?' I said. 'Who's speaking?' And then I got a reply, just a whisper. It came, 'Foscatine,' something like that, 'Regent's Court.'" The doctor uttered an exclamation. "Count Foscatani? He has a flat in Regent's Court. I must go at once. What can have happened?" "A patient of yours?" asked Poirot. "I attended him for some slight ailment a few weeks ago, in Italian, but he speaks English perfectly. Well, I must wish you good night, Monsieur Poirot, unless—" He hesitated. "I perceive the thought in your mind," said Poirot smilingly. "I shall be delighted to accompany you. Hastings, run down and get hold of a taxi." Taxis always make themselves sought for when one is particularly pressed for time, but I captured one at last, and we were soon bowling along in the direction of Regent's Park. Regent's Court was a new block of flats situated just off St. John's Wood Road. They had only recently been built and contained the latest service devices. There was no one in the hall. The doctor pressed the lift bell impatiently, and when the lift arrived, questioned the uniformed attendant sharply. "Flat 11, Count Foscatani. There's been an accident there, I understand." The man stared at him. "First I've heard of it. Mr. Graves, that's Count Foscatani's man, went out just about half an hour ago, and he said nothing." "Is the Count alone in the flat?" "No, sir, he's got 2 gentlemen dining with him." "What are they like?" I asked eagerly. We were in the lift now, ascending rapidly to the 2nd floor, on which flat 11 was situated. "I didn't see them myself, sir, but I understand that they were foreign gentlemen." He pulled back the iron door, and we stepped out on the landing. Number 11 was opposite to us. The doctor rang the bell. There was no reply, and we could hear no sounds from within. The doctor rang again and again. We could hear the bell trilling within, but no sign of life rewarded us. "This is getting serious," muttered the doctor. He turned to lift the attendant. "Is there any pass key to this door?" "There is one in the porter's office downstairs." "Get it then, and look here. I think you'd better send for the police." Poirot approved with a nod of the head. The man returned shortly. With him came the manager. "Will you tell me, gentlemen, what is the meaning of all this?" "Certainly. I received a telephone message from Count Foscatani stating that he had been attacked and was dying. You can understand that we must lose no time, if we are not already too late." The manager produced the key without more ado, and we all entered the flat. We passed first into the small square lounge hall. A door on the right of it was half open. The manager indicated it with a nod. "The dining room." Dr. Hawker led the way. We followed close on his heels. As we entered the room, I gave a gasp. The round table in the center bore the remains of a meal. 3 chairs were pushed back, as though their occupants had just risen. In the corner of the room, of the right of the fireplace, was a big writing desk, and sitting at it was a man, or what had been a man. His right hand still grasped the base of the telephone, but he had fallen forward, struck down by a terrific blow on the head from behind. The weapon was not far to seek. A marble statue stood where it had been hurriedly put down, the base of it stained with blood. The doctor's examination did not take a minute. "Stone dead. Must have been almost instantaneous. I wonder he even managed to telephone. It would be better not to move him until the police arrive." On the manager's suggestion, we searched the flat, but the result was a foregone conclusion. It was not likely that the murderers would be concealed there when all they had to do was to walk out. We came back to the dining room. Poirot had not accompanied us in our tour. I found him studying the center table with close attention. I joined him. It was a well-polished round mahogany table. Ooh, beautiful. I joined them. It was a well-polished round mahogany table. A bowl of roses decorated the center, and white lace mats reposed on the gleaming surface. There was a dish of fruit, but the 3 dessert plates were untouched. There were 3 coffee cups with remains of coffee in them. 2 black, 1 with milk. All 3 men had taken port, and the decanter, half full, stood before the center plate. One of the men had smoked a cigar, the other 2 cigarettes. A tortoise-shell and silver box holding cigars and cigarettes stood open upon the table. I enumerated all these facts to myself, but I was forced to admit that they did not shed any brilliant light on the situation. I wondered what Poirot saw in them to make him so intent. I asked him. "Mon ami," he replied, "you miss the point. I am looking for something that I do not see." "What is that?" "A mistake, even a little mistake, on the part of the murderer." He stepped swiftly to the small adjoining kitchen, looked in, and shook his head. "Monsieur," he said to the manager, "explain to me, I pray, your system of serving meals here." The manager stepped to the small hatch in the wall. "This is the service lift," he explained. "It runs to the kitchens at the top of the building. You order through the telephone, and the dishes are sent down in the lift, 1 course at a time. The dirty plates and dishes are sent up in the same manner. No domestic worries, you understand, and at the same time you avoid the wearying publicity of always dining in a restaurant." Poirot nodded. "Then the plates and dishes that were used tonight are on high in the kitchen. You permit that I mount there?" "Oh, certainly, if you like. Roberts, the lift man, will take you up and introduce you, but I'm afraid you won't find anything that's of any use. They're handling hundreds of plates and dishes, and they'll be all lumped together." Poirot remained firm, however, and together we visited the kitchens and questioned the man who had taken the order from flat 11.
The order was given from the a la carte menu for 3, he explained. Soup julienne, filet de sole normande, tournedos of beef, and a rice souffle. What time? Just about 8 o'clock, I should say. No, I'm afraid the plates and dishes have been all washed up by now. Unfortunate. We were thinking of fingerprints, I suppose? Not exactly, said Poirot with an enigmatical smile. I am more interested in Count Foscatani's appetite. Did he partake of every dish? Yes, but of course I can't say how much of each he ate. The plates were all soiled and the dishes empty, that is to say, with the exception of the rice souffle. There was a fair amount of that left. Ah, said Poirot, and seemed satisfied with the fact. Oh, yeah, I think that cyanide is made with something to do with rice. I don't remember what it was. As we descended to the flat again, he remarked in a low voice, We have decidedly to do with a man of method. Do you mean the murderer or Count Foscatani? The latter was undoubtedly an orderly gentleman. After imploring help and announcing his approaching demise, he carefully hung up the telephone receiver. I stared at Poirot. His words now and his recent inquiries gave me the glimmering of an idea. You suspect poison, I breathed. The blow on the head was a blind. Poirot merely smiled. We re-entered the flat to find the local inspector of police had arrived with 2 constables. He was inclined to resent our appearance, but Poirot calmed him with the mention of our Scotland Yard friend, Inspector Japp, and we were accorded a grudging permission to remain. It was a lucky thing we were, for we had not been back 5 minutes before an agitated middle-aged man came rushing into the room with every appearance of grief and agitation. This was Graves, valet butler to the late Count Foscatani. The story he had to tell was a sensational one. On the previous morning, 2 gentlemen had called to see the master. They were Italians, and the elder of the 2, a man of about 40, my age, gave his name as Signor Ascanio. Ascanio, yeah, there we go. Signor Ascanio. The younger was a well-dressed lad of about 24. Count Foscatani was evidently prepared for their visit, and immediately sent Graves out upon some trivial errand. Here the man paused and hesitated in his story. In the end, however, he admitted that, curious as to the purport of the interview, he had not obeyed immediately, but had lingered about, endeavoring to hear something of what was going on. The conversation was carried on in so low a tone that he was not as successful as he had hoped, but he gathered enough to make it clear that some kind of monetary proposition was being discussed, and that the basis of it was a threat. The discussion was anything but amicable. In the end, Count Foscatani raised his voice slightly, and the listener heard these words clearly. I have no time to argue further now, gentlemen. If you will dine with me tomorrow night at 8 o'clock, we will resume the discussion. Afraid of being discovered listening, Graves had then hurried out to do his master's errand. This evening the 2 men had arrived punctually at 8. During dinner they had talked of indifferent matters, politics, the weather, and the theatrical world. When Graves had placed the port upon the table and brought in the coffee, his master told him that he might have the evening off. Was that an unusual proceeding of his when he had guests? Asked the inspector. No, sir, it wasn't. That's what made me think it must be some business of very unusual kind that he was going to discuss with these gentlemen. That finished Graves's story. He had gone out about 8:30, and meeting a friend, had accompanied him to the Metropolitan Music Hall in Edgware Road. Nobody had seen the 2 men leave, but the time of the murder was fixed clearly around 8:47. A small clock on the writing table had been swept off by Foscatani's arm, and had stopped at that hour, which agreed with Miss Ryder's telephone summons. The police surgeon had made his examination of the body, and it was now lying on the couch. I saw the face for the first time, the olive complexion, the long nose, the luxuriant black mustache, and the full red lips drawn back from the dazingly white teeth. Not altogether a pleasant face. "Well," said the inspector, refastening his notebook, "the case seems clear enough. The only difficulty will be to lie our hands on this Signor Ascanio. I suppose his address is not in the dead man's pocketbook by any chance?" As Poirot had said, the late Foscatani was an orderly man. Neatly written in small, precise handwriting was the inscription, "Signor Paolo Ascanio, Grosvenor's Hotel." The inspector busied himself with the telephone, then turned to us with a grin. "Just in time. Our fine gentleman was off to catch the boat train to the continent. Well, gentlemen, that's about all we can do here. It's a bad business, but straightforward enough. One of these Italian vendetta things, as likely as not." Thus airily dismissed, we found our way downstairs. Dr. Hawker was full of excitement. "Like the beginning of a novel, eh? Really exciting stuff. Wouldn't believe it if you read about it." Poirot did not speak. He was very thoughtful. All the evening he had hardly opened his lips. "What says the master detective, eh?" asked Hawker, clapping him on the back. "Nothing to work your grey cells over this time." "You think not? What could there be?" "Well, for example, there is the window." "The window? But it was fastened. Nobody could have got out or in that way. I noticed it specially." "And why were you able to notice it?" The doctor looked puzzled. Poirot hastened to explain. "It is to the curtains that I refer. They were not drawn. A little odd, that. And then there was the coffee. It was very black coffee." "Oh, what of it?" "Very black," repeated Poirot. "In conjunction with that, let us remember that very little of the rice soufflé was eaten, and we get what?" "Moonshine," laughed the doctor. "You're pulling my leg." "Never do I pull the leg. Hastings here knows that I am perfectly serious." "I don't know what you are getting at all the same," I confessed. "You don't suspect the manservant, do you? He might have been in with the gang and put some dope in the coffee. I suppose that'll test his alibi?" "Without doubt, my friend. But it is the alibi of Signor Ascanio that interests me." "You think he has an alibi?" "That is just what worries me. I have no doubt that we shall soon be enlightened on that point." The Daily Newsmonger enabled us to become conversant with the succeeding events. Signor Ascanio was arrested and charged with the murder of Count Foscatani. When arrested, he denied knowing the Count and declared he had never been near Regent's Court, either on the evening of the crime or on the previous morning. The younger man had disappeared entirely. Signor Ascanio had arrived alone at the Grosvenor's Hotel from the Continent 2 days before the murder. All effort to trace the second man failed. Ascanio, however, was not sent for trial. No less a personage than the Italian ambassador himself came forward and testified at the police court proceedings that Ascanio had been with him at the embassy from 8 till 9 that evening. The prisoner was discharged. Naturally, a lot of people thought that the crime was a political one and was being deliberately hushed up. Poirot had taken a keen interest in all these points. Nevertheless, I was somewhat surprised when he suddenly informed me one morning that he was expecting a visitor at 11 o'clock, and that the visitor was none other than Ascanio himself. "He wishes to consult you?" "Du tout, Hastings. I wish to consult him." "What about?" "The Regent's Court murder." "You're going to prove that he did it? A man cannot be tried twice for murder, Hastings. Endeavor to have the common sense. Ah, that is our friend's ring." A few minutes later, Signor Ascanio was ushered in, a small, thin man with a secretive and furtive glance in his eyes. He remained standing, darting suspicious glances from one to the other of us. Monsieur Poirot? My little friend tapped himself gently on the chest. Be seated, Signor. You received my note. I am determined to get to the bottom of this mystery. In some small measure you can aid me. Let us commence. You, in company with a friend, visited the late Count Foscatani in the morning of Tuesday the 9th. The Italian made an angry gesture. I did nothing of the sort. I have sworn in court, precisement, and I have a little idea that you have sworn falsely. You threaten me? Bah! I have nothing to fear from you. I have been acquitted. Exactly. And as I am not an imbecile, it is not with the gallows I threaten you, but with publicity. Publicity! I see that you do not like the word. I had an idea that you would not. My little ideas, you know, they are very valuable to me. Come, Signor. Your only chance is to be frank with me. I do not ask to know whose indiscretions brought you to England. I know this much. You came for the special purpose of seeing Count Foscatani. He was not a count, growled the Italian. I have already noted the fact that his name does not appear in the Almanach de Gotha. Nevertheless, the title of count is often useful in the profession of blackmailing. Suppose I might as well be frank. You seem to know a good deal. I have employed my little grey cells to some advantage. Come, Signor Ascanio. You visited the dead man on Tuesday morning. That is so, is it not? Yes, but I never went there on the following evening. There was no need. I will tell you all. Certain information concerning a man of great position in Italy had come into this scoundrel's possession. He demanded a big sum of money in return for the papers. I came over to England to arrange the matter. I called upon him by appointment that morning. One of the young secretaries of the embassy was with me. The Count was more reasonable than I had hoped, although even then the sum of money I paid him was a huge one. Pardon, how was it paid? In Italian notes of comparatively small denomination. I paid over the money then and there. He handed me the incriminating papers. I never saw him again. Why did you not say all this when you were arrested? In my delicate position, I was forced to deny any association with the man. And how do you account for the offense of the evening, then? I can only think that someone must have deliberately impersonated me. I understand that no money was found in the flat. Poirot looked at him and shook his head. Strange, he murmured. We all have the little grey cells, and so few of us know how to use them. Good morning, Signor Ascano. I believe our story. It is very much as I had imagined, but I have to make sure. Where am I? After bowing his guest out, Poirot returned to his armchair and smiled at me. Let us hear Monsieur le Capitaine Hastings on the case. Well, I suppose Ascano was right. Somebody impersonated him. Never, never will you use the brains the good God has given you. Recall to yourself some words I uttered after leaving the flat that night. I referred to the window curtains not being drawn. We are in the month of June. It is still light at 8 o'clock. The light is failing by past. Ça vous dit quelque chose? I perceive a struggling impression that you will arrive some day. Now, let us continue. The coffee was, as I said, very black. Count Foscatani's teeth were magnificently white. Coffee stains the teeth. We reason from that Count Foscatani did not drink any coffee. Yet there was coffee in all 3 cups. Why should anyone pretend Count Foscatani had drunk coffee when he had not done so? I shook my head, utterly bewildered. Come, I will help you.
What evidence have we that Ascanio and his friend, or two men posing as them, ever came to the flat that night? Nobody saw them go in. Nobody saw them go out. We have the evidence of one man and of a host of inanimate objects. You mean... I mean knives and forks and plates and empty dishes. Ah, but it was a clever idea. Graves is a thief and a scoundrel, but what a man of method. He overhears a portion of the conversation in the morning, enough to realize that Ascanio will be in an awkward position to defend himself. The following evening, about 8 o'clock, he tells his master he is wanted at the telephone. Poscatani sits down, stretches out his hand to the telephone, and from behind Graves strikes him down with the marble figure. Then quickly to the service telephone. Dinner for 3. It comes. He lays the table, dirties the plates, knives and forks, etc. But he has to get rid of the food, too. Not only is he a man of brain, he has a resolute and capacious stomach. But after eating 3 tornadoes, the rice souffle is too much for him. He even smokes a cigar and 2 cigarettes to carry out the illusion. But it was magnificently thorough. Then, having moved on the hands of the clock at 8:47, he smashes it and stops it. The one thing he does not do is to draw the curtains. But if there had been a real dinner party, the curtains would have been drawn as soon as the light began to fail. Then he hurries out, mentioning the guest to the lift man in passing. He hurries to a telephone box and, as near as possible to 8:47, rings up the doctor and his master's dying cry. So successful is his idea that no one ever inquires if a call was put through from flat 11 at that time. Except Hercule Poirot, I suppose, I said sarcastically. Not even Hercule Poirot, said my friend with a smile. I am about to inquire now. I had to prove my point to you first. But you will see I will be right. And then Japp, to whom I have already given a hint, will be able to arrest the respectable Graves. I wonder how much of the money he has spent. Poirot was right. He always is, confound it. All right, so we have reached the end of today's story time. Next story time will be on Wednesday, and we are going to be finishing up the book Poirot Investigates. It's going to be 4 short stories, so it'll probably be a bit longer than today's was. I am not going to follow this up with a gaming stream. Hopefully I can do that on Wednesday. We will see. And hopefully by next week I'll have some Christmas art with the kitties that we can have as our background when we start The Haunted House next Monday, same time, 2 to 4. Anyways, yes, thank you so much for hanging out with me, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. I will see you in December. Oh, yeah, first off, let's find somebody to raid. Wow, I am behind things. Come on. Why don't you like me, mouse? Alright. Let's see who is streaming right now. We have Curie, Honey Crossing, Kipsadaisy, Night Corral. I hope you get some good sleep. Let's see. Honey Crossing. There's Rock Garden Decorating. Twiggy, Longest Journey. And Kipsadaisy. Oh, hey! Well, Swags is streaming, so we can host him, or raid him. Let's see. Oops.
No, actually, I think we are going to do Honey Crossing. All right. Well, thank you again for hanging out with me. Sorry, there was that bit of indecision there. Okay. All right. Hope to see you next time on Wednesday, 2 to 4. Have a good rest of your November. Bye.